Yeah! Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, coming at you live from the middle of nowhere, the center of everywhere, here once again to give you yet another scrumptious dose of conversational boogie. This is the one, the only, the sexy, a little spicy, the shift happens. Yeah, hey, what's up, Daryl? What's up, Sylvain, MJ, the Muse, Pablo? What's going on, folks? Good to see you. Thanks for hanging out. Yeah, believe it or not, 2 shows in a row. How about that? It's been a while since we've done that. And, yeah, we sure have a good one for you tonight. We got the man, the legend, Jason Quitt in the house. We're gonna get to him in just a second. Also, we got another homie hanging out tonight. We'll see him in a second as well. But yeah, I don't have too much to say up front, really, other than, so last week, there was an echo on my voice the whole time, and nobody said anything. So I would like to establish skate park rules, which is, like if your homie is about to try a trick, but you notice some dog shit on his wheels, you don't just not say anything. Like, hey, yo, you got some dog shit on your wheels. You're like, oh, cool, thanks, man. Like you just kind of look out for one another. So yeah, if something doesn't sound right, let me know. Although, to be honest, it took me a while to fix that earlier today. So, I don't know, that could have gone either way. But I'm just saying, if something sounds wrong, do not hesitate to let me know. I'd actually really appreciate it. Especially, the new format and everything, still getting used to all of this jazz. So, let's see. Yeah, that's it. I don't really have anything else to say, really. So I'm gonna go ahead and welcome the 2 homies on the show. Joining us here, we've got Elfman's going to be hanging out, sort of the co-host for the evening, and then also we've got author, researcher, lecturer extraordinaire, and spirit animal to many, the one and only Jason Quitt. What's going on, Jason?
Hello. Just enjoying a beautiful, beautiful day in Ontario, and it's also the full moon, so quite a day and night.
Beautiful. Now, when's the last time you used a slinky?
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
I don't remember.
But you have used one.
I definitely owned one when I was watching Pee Wee Herman when I was a child, for sure.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down just for future reference. Okay. All right, duly noted. All right, that's how I wanted to start the show off.
Did that just date me? That when I was a kid, that was on the TV?
That's gonna come up later in life. Trust me. I'm not gonna let that go. And there's more where that came from, by the way. What about you, Elf, man? You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if Elf has never used a slinky. What say you, Elf?
Oh, I use a slinky, dude. Come on, man.
Okay.
Guys.
Just making sure we're all human, especially with you being an elf and all.
I used to play with the mushrooms to begin with, and then from there it just went downhill.
Yep, there you go. So now, Jason, we were just talking about this before, but I want to bring it up again because you've had a hell of a run these last several years. This year, you came out with your new book, Astral Experiences. Last year, you came out with Gates of the Anunnaki. The year before, you came out with Astral Genesis, and then the year before, you did your redo of Egyptian Postures. Dude, first of all, that's gnarly. Second of all, do you think, is this sort of like, are you going to do that? Do you think, is that sort of your rhythm now? Are you going to pump out a new book every year? Or did it just sort of happen that way? Like, was that kind of the plan? Did you set a schedule, or that's just when it came out?
No, the whole thing was when I first, let's say, came onto this scene, I had the book with Bob Mitchell, which is Forbidden Knowledge. And that's most likely how I met you to begin with, is that book got me on these shows. And, once all that stuff happened with Bob and he passed away, that kind of book was taken down. And so I didn't have the Forbidden Knowledge book to sell anymore. I didn't have the book in public. And sure, there's, you can get used copies online, but I didn't have a book. And then I had my Egyptian Postures stuff, which was popular at the time, but it wasn't a book. It was like kind of like a manual that was like less than 50 pages. So my whole thing was, when COVID happened and everything kind of stopped, I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to work on the Egyptian Postures book, which I did. So that was like, got it out of the way. And then I'm like, okay, now I need to work on Egyptian Postures 2, which is the moon, which I still haven't done yet. So maybe there's one more book coming out after this. But every time I tried to write the moon book, I got like pulled in some weird direction. And maybe it's because it's the energy of the moon or the energy of that research. But every time I tried to write something for that book, I got pulled into some other weird direction that I just kind of followed. So I had those 3 books, the Egyptian Postures, then Astral Genesis, and then after that was Case of the Anunnaki. And then, which was very strange, is people started to really get into the out-of-body experience material. That was originally what I wrote in Forbidden Knowledge, and it's been 10 years since I wrote Forbidden Knowledge. So I said, you know what? Now is like the perfect opportunity to do like a 10-year anniversary of Forbidden Knowledge. I'm going to rewrite that those experiences, but from a different perspective. And obviously, I'm in a much different place now, and more experiences has happened. So it's a really good update to that original work. So right now I feel like I'm in this kind of completion thing. So I don't know if I'm going to pump out a book every year now that I have 4 under the belt. I'm just going to kind of chill and kind of make those books better and better and better. But who knows? Like, you never know how inspiration is going to hit you. So maybe something will come up and I'll go, okay, I got to like document this or write about this. And then a couple months later, there's another book out.
Right. And not to mention that paper you published earlier this year as well. And also not to mention, I don't know if you wanted to, but Astral Genesis, there is a new and improved version of it that is now available, right?
Oh, yes. So I I did this quietly. When I wrote Astral Genesis, I wrote it so quickly, as in, I made this discovery and I just had to get it out like as fast as humanly possible. So, and back then, I wasn't using Grammarly. I wasn't using any AI editing tools or anything like that. It was just straight me on a keyboard. And a lot of the pictures are very confusing as well. So, a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity of having the AI assistant from Grammarly, and I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to run my old book through it. And yeah, I really edited it. Like I rewrote that book, corrected a lot of things, and redid a lot of the pictures to make them much more simpler and easy to grasp, and like just correct everything to make it like as best as humanly possible accurate, so that it'll stand the test of time. So if you just went and bought the Astral Genesis book, the book that will come in the mail is the new one. Yeah. But I think I shaved about like 20 pages off of it through editing, like, so that's pretty good.
Okay. And so with that, because we sort of talked about before how almost in a sense, once Gates of the Anunnaki came out, it almost, to a certain extent, we would sort of tell people, actually, maybe read Gates of the Anunnaki first and then go back to Astral Genesis. Do you think now with the shaving off and the redoing of it, do you think that's still the case? Which one would you recommend people going into first, despite the release order?
Well, I would just say that, like, Gates of the Anunnaki is heavily directed into the Mesopotamian type of mindset religion of the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians. So it's covering a lot of these ancient tablets. So if you really like that kind of style of the old tales of the gods and the Anunnaki, that's it. Whereas Astral Genesis, it's heavily influenced on Egyptian mysticism. So it's all about the Egyptians and their view of the stars and their view of the afterlife and that whole connection in between that. And then that leads into the discovery of this kind of solar angle, which is that 23.5 degrees plus 15 degrees plus 30 degrees plus all these different things that kind of make up this architecture of their work. And so that's kind of like the discovery, whereas the next book with the Anunnaki, it kind of just gives an overview of that. So now it doesn't matter. You could pick up either of the books, whatever you're pulled to. I think they're both equally strong now.
There you go. And like, it's sort of, you almost can't, despite the, what you just said, they both go along together. They're almost like not a trilogy, but a duology. They're sort of, they go hand in hand, those two. And if you're going to read one, you gotta read the other. It is my personal opinion.
And now that I have those two books together, it's kind of giving me this other kind of overview of the architecture or the archetypes of the gods from different religions or different backgrounds, and how they've kind of evolved into, let's say, like the zodiac we have today, or the different mythologies that we know. So there's definitely more content, there's more things that are going to evolve from those two books, which I'm pretty excited about.
Fantastic. Now, so, I mean, to this day, Pillar 43, is it Pillar 43? The pillar
sure.
over
the one with the bird and the sun. Yeah.
Right. So I think everybody here probably, we've heard all kinds of takes on that pillar. Graham Hancock and his TV series on Netflix, him and the other guy were dissecting it. I just recently saw a video of Robert Edward Grant doing his own sort of dissection of it. But man, they obviously haven't read your book, because it makes so much more sense when you put it into perspective. I know a person that gave him your book, but all you can do is give a book, right? But
right.
Have you, because I think you guys have done some events, the same events at the same time, but have you...
With who?
Robert Edward Grant. Yeah.
Yes. I did meet him. I did hand him my book.
So he's got 2 copies.
So he's probably got 2 copies. But the thing with my books is that it's different when you have it and you look and you try to read it, where I have the presentation. And like the presentation and the books are 2 very different beasts. And I think to introduce someone at that level, I really have to kind of sit them down and give them the show, give them the presentation.
Yeah.
I think it's much easier visually to understand. Plus, when you see a bunch of pictures with lines on it, like what it doesn't really mean anything, and you kind of blur it over and say, "Well, I don't get this," or "Who cares?" Or so you have to kind of like build up to the reason it's so cool or the reason it's so important, and this is like kind of like a breakthrough that no one's really caught on to. So yes, I've given copies to a number of people, but I think eventually this information is going to come out, and I find a lot of people are already kind of putting the pieces together. And you know, I'm not the first one at all to talk about Pillar 43 at all. You know,
Right.
it's like many people in the archaeoastronomy community have already like put down the different constellations and said, you know, the bird on it is Cygnus, and the scorpion on it is Scorpio, and you know, the serpent is Draco. So it's like they've already mapped this out. I'm not like recreating the wheel or anything here, but what I'm trying to show is that there's a story, that this is kind of like the oldest story ever told, and it's written in the stars. And when you see the pillars, that it's a kind of like a T pillar, where you have, think of it like a mushroom. You have like the stem and you have the cap. Okay, you got these two parts of these pillars, and it's cut in the middle. And when you look up in the sky, you have the elliptical, which is the path of the sun, which goes across the sky, and the sun passes through these 12 constellations that we know today as the zodiac. But as the sun passes, it passes through the Milky Way galaxy. From our perspective, it goes underneath the Milky Way and then above the Milky Way. So you have this, you know, 6 months, let's say, in the underworld and 6 months in the upper world. So it's like heaven and hell, these two worlds. And so this is kind of like that division. It's the same type of division in the pillars that we see as the sun passes through the Milky Way. So it's kind of showing this progression or this story of these characters and what it means on Earth. And it shows these three handbags at the top of the pillar. And a lot of people are very excited about handbags. But if you actually read the tablets, or you read the mysticism of the Akkadians and the Babylonians, it talks about the handbags, you know, and they're not handbags, they're buckets of water, you know, and it has to do with renewal, it has to do with rebirth, it has to do with fertility. You know, these are the gods that are responsible for bringing water to the land, to basically bless the land with new water like the springtime. So life will evolve, life will come back to the earth. It's the same story as Osiris, which is the god of vegetation, the god of death. And it's through the rising of Osiris, it's the rising of vegetation. He's the god of vegetation. And just to add another thing, you know, to go on the whole handbag thing, they also wear wrist watches. But if you look closely at the wrist watches, they are actually chamomile flowers. And chamomile flowers are the symbol of Ishtar, which is the goddess of fertility. So the kings and the gods would wear that symbol to show that they were, you know, with Ishtar. But getting back to the to the Pillar 43, those aren't handbags. Those aren't water buckets, in my opinion, on the top of it. And in my opinion, it's the three seasons. It's the solstices and the equinox in the center. And so it's a horizon with the path of the sun. And one of the discoveries we made in Astral Genesis is that what I did was I mapped the sun, the arc of the sun, in its three positions during the year. So the lowest in winter solstice, I mapped the arc. The equinox, I mapped the arc. And then the highest the sun is in summer solstice, I mapped the arc. And I mapped it for the exact location of where it would be in Göbekli Tepe. And when I took those arcs, those three different sizes, and I imposed them directly on top of those arcs on the handbags, it was like a perfect match. So it was like, are they showing us this progression of the seasons, progression of the sun, and showing the constellations at the same time? Like it's a picture of the cosmos and the cycles of time is my interpretation, but it's also many other people's interpretation.
Yeah, and so with all of that said, and also sort of going back to similar acknowledgments that you've pointed out with Egypt specifically, I mean, what do you make of, I mean, the recent discovery of all of this shit underneath Egypt? You know, you got these pillars that are coiled going up, which the first thing that comes to my mind is Chris Dunn's book, The Giza Power Plant. And but I'm, you know, I've read your book as well, and I feel like it's one thing, I think, to I'm trying to figure out how to say what I'm trying to say clearly. They're like, so they're obviously telling a story, right? And you point that out very beyond a doubt clearly, right? But on top of that, what if, I mean, I don't know, what if it's a multi-dimensional fractal sort of situation where it's not only is it telling that story, but it also happens to be how this sort of I guess you would call it lost technology worked, and why these physical structures were set that way and aligned to all the, you know, different constellations and whatnot, not just like definitely to tell a story, but what if those alignments also were directly responsible to how this sort of architectural machine functioned, as Chris Dunn sort of tries to explain in his book? What do you make of that sort of trying to blend those together?
Well, the truth is I can't. I mean, like we really don't know what's under there. We have scans and interpretations of the scans. Remember, the Giza Plateau is a limestone basin. All right, so it's like they got a lot of the stones to make the pyramids right from the Giza Plateau. So that we're talking about how old? 15 million plus years, or 50 million plus years of limestone. So it's an ancient ocean, basically. That's what the limestone is. It's an ancient ocean. So for them to kind of drill down or carve out through the plateau is no easy feat. You know, just in that, it's no easy feat. Now, we know from ground penetrating radar, we already know that there's tunnels and labyrinths and like deep shafts that go all through the Giza Plateau. So we already know that there's like a whole network of things down there, but they're not really explored or shut off for. So we don't know. It could even be filled with water now. How do we even get there if it's all filled with water? So I would just kind of like step back and try not to interpret anything, because to say that you're going like a kilometer or two deep under like limestone, that's pretty incredible. That would take a ton of machinery, moving earth and rock. That's crazy. So could it be a power plant? I don't know. Could it be any of these things? I don't know. The only thing I know about the pyramids are that they're an astrological timepiece. That know 100% for sure. So they were built to honor the heavens, honor the sun and the moon, and track those cycles. So, there's a lot of theories where it's like a power plant where it does something with water, like it pumps the water. These are all great theories that I think have merit to look through, but I don't think anybody's gotten it right yet. Because I've looked at this from every angle possible, and where I'm left now is just like,
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of like a raccoon trying to analyze a fire truck. Like, what is that, and what is it for? Like, all we know is it just runs us over if we get in the way, right?
Yeah.
That might be a bad analogy, but
well, there's one person that had a really incredible answer, and his name is John Shaughnessy. And he has a book called Pyramid Gravity Force. And I think I brought this up with you before, but basically what he was measuring was that there's this kind of a gravitational anomaly around the pyramids, and that it has to do with the relationship between the Earth, the pyramids, and our moon. And that what he believes through his study of the pyramids is that it has an effect on the planet like a weight on a wheel. So that let's say, for example, the planet is wobbly, the climate is terrible, there's a lot of chaos on the planet, and they build these gigantic structures on the planet, kind of like a balancer to move something there and create a force using gravity with the moon to kind of stabilize the environment on the Earth. So it's kind of like it's like what you would do on Mars, like for terraforming. It's like, how do you change the planet from Mars into something livable? You have to kind of build some type of technology to change the atmosphere to make it livable. And think about the world back then, whereas all these cataclysms, you're coming out from an ice age, the world is not stable for life. And then suddenly it is. Suddenly they can farm, they can irrigate the land, they can have livestock, and they can travel. They can navigate the world, when before it would have been very difficult when it was really crazy climate.
While you're on the moon, I got a question for you, because I keep hearing people out there talking about it, and I'm sure I'm going to say it. They keep talking about how the moon wasn't there before. So my question to you is, you've researched through lots of stuff. Have you found anything anywhere that actually talks about it not being there at a point in time? Does Egypt have any records whatsoever of it not being there and then just appearing?
No, I haven't found anything of the sorts. I found the opposite. The first timekeeping, let's say the first timekeeping artifacts that they've discovered that go back at least 30,000 years. The first artifacts they found are, let's say, like antler carvings, where they would actually mark the phases of the moon. So back 30,000 years ago, at least, they were tracking the moon as a timepiece. So the earliest things that we have found in hunter-gatherer societies is them basically tracking the moon.
Did you say 30,000 years?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
I think that's the oldest artifact they've found that has phases of the moon on it.
Yeah. And
when was the last time the civilization went down and came back up? Was that 30 something? Don't they say like 32,000 years cycle?
When
civilization?
Well, I don't know. I don't know because, like I said, we have very little things. Like we have these kind of history of nomadic tribes going around the earth, we can find them going back like at least, like I said, 20, 30,000 years. But then something changed, which is obviously the warming of the planet, the stabilizing of the climate, and then suddenly you have explosions of Neolithic peoples that started to farm and stay in one location. So there is like a historical archaeological record where you can track different populations. And this is why everybody kind of fights about Atlantis, because, you know, if there was Atlantis, you know, how come we can track these kind of like hunter-gatherer tribes and find artifacts of all these people, and, you know, dig and find all these past nomadic cultures that are even pre-pottery, but we can't find anything related to, let's say, like an Atlantis higher technology. The greatest thing we've ever found would be all the stuff around ancient Turkey. So like the Göbekli Tepe's type of stuff. That is the furthest back that we admit to, that we can't say, you know, doesn't exist. There's beautiful structures that go almost to the last ice age found in Turkey. So we know that that was a hub of civilization. So other than that, I don't know. And again, you know, when you're talking about these people coming up from the earth, there's a lot of sites where there's underground cities. You know,
I was getting ready to bring that up because if you pay attention, a lot of, and me and Gigi's talked about this many times, but I firmly believe, man, all the answers we need is in the ground. Nothing up is going to do us anything. It has nothing. The biggest thing that we need to do is dig, because that's the only way we're ever going to find our origin, period.
Yeah.
You can't find anything.
And you know what? It really makes perfect sense. If there was a cataclysm, and I'm not even talking about the last cataclysm. I'm talking about a cataclysm, let's say like 100,000 years ago. You know,
right.
If there was a really big cataclysm 100,000 years ago, and humans have been walking the earth for 300,000 years at least, so yeah, we have a pretty big time scale here. The safest place for humanity to survive is underground. And if the surface is uninhabitable or very dangerous, you know, they may have, humanity or some form of humanity may have went into hiding underground for thousands and thousands of years, evolved underground, and some of the descendants of those ancestors that lived underground may have come up at one point, and they were highly advanced, you know, and very different. They would definitely look different and be different than people that stayed on the surface.
Well, it's like the Hopi tribe, you know, they talk about the ant people that came up and got them and took them down underneath there when we started having problems on the upper side of the earth. They took them down. When it was safe, they came back out. You know, that's their story and their history.
Yep.
It really shocks me that most people, if you start talking about inner earth or you start talking about anything in the ground, people automatically go, oh, that's bullshit. And it's funny when you sit here and look through any old history and you're just like, cave paintings, everything talks about people coming up from the ground. Yeah. And that's so prominent in history, but yet people nowadays, it's like, oh, we came from the stars. We came from this. We came, you know, and I'm just like, dude, we don't know nothing about us. We're in the ground. That's where we need to go, period, with anything. And it's like me and Gigi was talking, every time we start digging or starting to find things, they shut it down quick. And then their answer all the time is, well, we're going to wait and give it some time to see if we can maybe figure out ways of doing it without harming anything. So we're going to put a hold on it. But when you do that, what happens? Generation all of a sudden goes away, and then the next generation could care less. You know, my kid, she could care less about history, because these kids now, they're just learning about tech. They want forward. Nobody wants to go behind. Seems like generationally, they just get rid of history really quick.
You know, it's really funny you said that. There's You can keep talking, but there's an image I found from Mexico, or pre-Inca, and it basically shows this person emerging out of the ground with like a baby. It's like a carving.
Do you have that right there?
I'm trying to find it so that I could pop it up on the screen here. But you know
It
me,
just amazes me that everybody, what the history and the knowledge we get now is not the stuff that I learned about, like I told, Gigi last time, man, everything is done generationally. And if you can see how they just do it all the time like this. It's just a generation thing. If something comes out, they kind of hold off on looking at it, finding out about it, and then a generation later, nobody cares because they're too worried about whatever's new.
Right, and sometimes they put... Yeah.
isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That is wicked, dude.
And I mean...
So it's like, when I see stuff like this, I'm like, yeah, they came out of the ground, like, or they came from a portal from another world, and the whole underground thing was a portal to the underworld, and it was usually in caves or mountains or things like that, and that's how you got to the gods.
Yeah, and there's so many cultures that literally talk about, the ones that taught them stuff came from underground, and that their ancestors came from underground. I mean, it's all over the world. They can't be, it's not like they're talking about nothing at all, right? And, but one thing, I mean, whether it's the pyramids of Egypt or you name the megalithic structure around the world, especially, man, the ones in Cambodia, there's so many ones in India, just all over the place. Shit. There's ones in North Korea that we'll never be allowed to see that are actually pretty impressive. There's a couple of old photos of those. There's all kinds of stuff in China that they've intentionally grown trees on top of so that it just looks like a triangle mountain. They just tell you it's a mountain. But
look what they
one
did
thing,
with Easter Island, man. That blows my mind because, when I was a kid, they're like, oh, look, they carved these heads of these stones. It's just heads carved. And now they've dug down deeper and they're like, oh, man, there's hieroglyphs on it and they got feet.
yeah, the head is only like 1/10 of what it is. There's so much of it underground. But when I'm thinking, what I've always thought really is, so let's go with the pyramids, for example. Obviously, some astrological significance. They're telling the story just like you've explained quite very well in your books. There's also this possible element of some sort of technology being done there as well, using those same alignments. But whatever the case is, they are telling a story. But not only are they telling a story, they are telling it in the only possible way that can survive through cataclysms, which sort of, to me, inherently means that they knew there was one coming. And how are you going to pass down information through the generations? Well, you can write whatever language you want, give it a few thousand years. We don't have any basis on how to translate that stuff. Write it on paper. That paper's going to evaporate. Draw it in the dirt. That's going to be gone. The only way is through stones, and the only universal language, which is mathematics. And with those perfect alignments, it really not only, it seems to me that they're not only telling a story, but they made sure that that story would physically stay intact throughout all kinds of earthquakes and cataclysms, which means, to me, it seems pretty obvious that they knew that there were some cataclysms coming. And like, how else would you leave a message for future post cataclysmic civilizations,
And they buried it. Like they said, they buried Göbekli Tepe and other sites. But think of a tomb. Like look at Egypt, the Valley of the Kings, or these tombs. They're chambers in the ground, like you're returning to the earth. But the work that was in there, they're kind of like time capsules, so it's like, it's preserving a history, it's preserving a story. Everything that was painted on those walls the story of like the Book of the Dead, or the Book of the Gates, and how they travel to the underworld. In my mind, that's one version of the story. There's also a very hidden, deeper meaning to those stories that need to survive. But the tools they left in there, the artifacts they left in there, they all have significant meaning that were meant for the people in the future, not just for the dead pharaoh. So we still haven't really deciphered, or we're trying to figure this out, of what this means for us. And so far, I think we failed in that test.
Yeah, and speaking of, so Dragon Rose is saying, she thought it was about 26,000 years or so. I think she might be talking about, Gudum Padang. Gudum Padang seems to be, which I think is, it's like the first or second episode in either season 1 or 2 of Graham Hancock's Netflix series, which is called Ancient Apocalypse. But they show pretty without a shadow of a doubt, that shit was built about that long ago. Yeah. and this is not nature. This is very, especially the underground surveys, what, I don't know if it's LiDAR or what they used, but you can see these chambers and they're perfect, so do you think, because with your work with Egypt in your books, you definitely, because when, especially these days, when somebody says Egyptian, that could mean one of several groups of people. They could be talking about the mainstream narrative 2500 BC, chicken bones and dental floss Egyptians, or they could be talking about Robert Schoch's water erosion. This stuff must have been built before the last ice age Egyptians. And I know I've asked you this before, but let's start here. What is the minimum age, do you think? Let's just stick with the Sphinx and the 3 pyramids. How old do you think those are, if you had to guess?
Well, I would say that I know they've found, let's say, wood fragments, and I believe it was cedar they found in the construction between the blocks, or in the pyramid when they opened it up. I forget exactly where they found this, but when they carbon dated that, I think the date they got was like 3300 BC. All right, so that's already moving the needle back almost 1,000 years before it was built. So that seems like a very interesting time in that history of this kind of explosion of civilization. Now, when we're talking about the Sphinx is carved out of that bedrock. It's actually, they dug into the bedrock, not the bedrock, the limestone, to get that figure of the Sphinx. And this is where my research comes in, because I'm not an archaeologist. I'm a guy that loves symbology, and I love ancient mythology, and I always want to know, where does this stuff come from? Like, where did this information start? These stories, where did they start from? And when you think of the Sphinx, you look at the Giza Plateau. Why do they call it a Giza Plateau? It's because it's flat. Okay, that's the perfect place to put a pyramid, because you need this flat, hard surface. And then what they did is they carved the blocks out of the limestone of the Giza Plateau and to build this pyramid. So it had a really good foundation, because it's a plateau. But the Sphinx, its head is above the plateau, which means that before it was ever carved into a Sphinx, it was a mound, it was a hill. And you always hear these stories of these sacred hills, or these sacred mounds, or these sacred hills of the sun. And this is where, the first creation stories come from, which is, the first light of Ra, when Ra separates from the waters, his light shines on the Ben stone, which is the Earth mound. You know, and he's basically the sun, and he honors the sun. So we see mounds all over the planet, especially in North America, where they build these mound sites out of these hills or build artificial mounds that are aligned for solar or lunar alignments. So it's the same type of stuff that goes on in Egypt. So my current belief is that whatever that mound was in Egypt that later became the Sphinx, no one really talks about that. They talk about the Sphinx. They don't talk about that limestone mound that they carved into the Sphinx was very sacred for some reason a very, very long time ago. And I would predate that. I would say the Sphinx came first.
Yeah, that seems obvious enough to me, yeah.
And then the pyramids.
Right.
So something, that mound or that hill must have been some type of ritual site for the sun. And remember, because they have it set up to be aligned perfectly for the rising of the equinox. The Sphinx is looking directly east at the equinox. So it's a very important time to the Egyptians, but it must have been a very important time before. So, we can go back to pre-dynastic times, but I think it's much older than that. And it comes from this type of shamanic consciousness that was in that area. And so we don't really know much about those individuals.
Yeah, we sure don't. I wish we did. I just find it fascinating that we see all over the world these types of structures, and a lot of which use the same, you look at like Sacsayhuaman, and you look at other parts in Europe, and like literally the same techniques with the same nubs and the same polygonal going through a corner, the same stuff, and it's obviously hard to date stone, or impossible to date, really. All you've got is stories. But one thing that seems clear is all over the world, it was very important to them to not only leave these messages, but do them in a very artistic, there's a certain artistic intention and spiritual intention into the architecture that we just that doesn't happen today. We build rectangle buildings and shitty roofs, and it breaks down after 20, like there's no meaning in our architecture anymore, which really makes you wonder, like, what was the general understanding of reality at that time, where you have every civilization, dedicating their resources to these phenomenal, multi-meaningful structures, whereas we just, like, our society just has no place. Like, who's going to benefit from this? Who's going to pay for this yacht? And there's just nothing of that in our current. So it really makes me wonder what sort of connection that clearly everyone around the world had in some form or another at the time, and where did we lose that? Because we don't seem to have any of that in terms of generally speaking.
Well, I this is what the whole book of Astral Genesis was about, was could we find this intentional signature, which you're talking about, this intentional artistic signature that's found in cultures all around the world in our most ancient past. And I believe it was found through their artwork and architecture. And it's like, once you understand that knowledge, you can start seeing this kind of understanding or knowledge signature that's been given or passed or known to all these cultures around the world. Now, what I would say is that, look, all I can go with is stories. And I remember many years ago when I was in Peru, And, we have these guides who are native there, and, they tell you a story that you don't really hear in the textbooks, that you don't really hear from TV shows. And I remember having a conversation with one of them. And again, we were at Saxe-Wellman, and they were trying to explain to me what it looked like before it was dismantled, you know? And from their stories, they were saying that they had like these water towers set up that were collecting the sacred water from the mountain, and that they put like gold and silver on these structures, and that, so when a lightning storm would come by, it would hit this water, or hit these silos, like lightning rods, and then they would use this water for something. You know, then you hear these stories where it's like when the Spanish come over there, and they see what is built in, let's say, Peru. They see what's built in these structures, and immediately they say these cities were built by the devil, and we have to get rid of them immediately. And they spent so much energy to literally block by block dismantle these structures. So think of how impressive these structures actually were, that you had to have people from the other part of the planet come over on a boat with like an army of people to literally dismantle these structures, because they were so horrified by what they've discovered there that nobody else in the world could figure this out or know what they found. And then you hear about also the stories in South America where they come over and the buildings are basically lined with gold. Like their temples, you walk in and it's floor to ceiling gold, just gold, and they literally stripped everything and sent it back. Who were these people?
Right.
And why aren't we told about this history? Because it's been completely erased. We have no idea how they did this, or this technology. We have no idea what temples or structures were there before they were completely destroyed and dismantled, because of how, I can't even tell you what they look like. We just don't know. And this is a big scar on our consciousness. I think that, think about, you think you're the greatest in the world, or you have, the greatest knowledge in the world, and you're building temples in Europe, and then you come over here and you're like, wait a second, this is even greater than what we have back home. But how can that be? So again, we don't really know the full story here.
Yeah, it's incredible to me that anybody would, just that mindset of people coming over here, and instead of just being in awe and wonder of these structures and wanting to learn about them, instead they just tear it down. Like what? That's like the exact opposite reaction that I think most of us would have. I think we would all be in awe and wonder and want to learn more, unless they somehow did know more, and somehow that knowing of the more threatened their power, grip, control over the narrative.
And I forget where I heard this story from. I heard this a long time ago, so that's why it's hard for me to remember. But I remember someone telling me that when we started to come over to this land, there would be these giant spheres all over the place. And you still see them down in Central America and South America, these giant like granite spheres. We have no idea why they have this. This is just a weird thing. Someone carved these. So what they would tell people is that there would be like hidden treasure in these spheres, these granite spheres. So people would come, and when they would find them, what would they do? They destroy them, trying to find the treasure inside of them.
Now, I find it kind of funny that if you look at the way they back then were looking at things, it was through religious eyes.
Hmm.
And it seems to me, even those ancient cultures, I the way I've read your stuff and the way I look at things, I think that we were looking through everything religiously, and I don't think those people did. We call things temples. I don't think they're temples. I think they were buildings that were set up for certain things because we all know that certain frequencies do certain things. Now imagine they did that water. They knew that that water, if it's in this silo and that gold there conducts and it hits with electricity, I think they were more scientifically advanced and understood things. Because look at what we use for gold now. I mean, we put it in everything. You know, it's all the computer stuff. It's just I find it interesting. The more I listen to you, the more I sit and I go, man, we look through everything through religious eyes, and that's where we mess up. That's where I think we lose touch with everything because you're just so blocked from releasing and going, okay, I'm getting rid of this dogma. Let's look at it, you know, scientifically. How would we do this? And it seems the more we look at things through science eyes, the more stuff we learn, and that hidden knowledge is actually right there and so easy to look at. You know, when you look at that, do you look at it like, because people say temples and you automatically hear temple, you think religion. There was a god. They were thinking of a god. I don't anymore. I look at it and I'm like, no, it's not a god. It had to do something with the frequencies, and that building was for this, whether it be learning, healing, whatever. You know, what do you think?
Or, you know, their interpretation of a god would be a personification of a natural force. You know, so the only way to describe that science was to give it a personality and a character. You know,
Humans are good at making stories up.
yes,
That's how we relate to each other and talk.
right, exactly. So that's I think that's one way of passing the information down, but then when it trickles down to people that don't understand, they just take it completely literally and say, oh, that they believed this, God was in the heavens and it threw thunderbolts. Like, no, it was a natural phenomenon, and that's the way they tried to describe it, you know. So I completely agree. I think that there was, you know, and I go back to this kind of mystical teaching of these mystery schools, where they knew that the general population would not understand the information at that level, but they would actively destroy it. They would fear it. So they created these class systems of knowledge where, you know, one story will go out to the public, and then the elite or the people that had the knowledge would then dissect it and say, well, this is what it really means. You know, so that's how the information kind of survived. And, you know, looking at the world today, I kind of understand that mindset.
But what I find amazing is if you look at the Bible, it's done in layers. Most old texts are done in layers. We look at things like you're talking to mystery schools. A simple person looks at the Bible. I'm not saying people are simple because they looked at the Bible. I'm just saying we look at it like religious, you know, and we're just like, oh, God, this, God, that. But then if you look at the Bible real close, you start realizing, man, there's a lot of astrology in that. And there's also ways of how society should live. There's also a layer of, hey, this is how we grow things. There's a layer of don't eat this meat mixed with this because of, you know, if you look at that, it's so layered. It amazes me that a lot of ancient text, if you look at it, it's so layered with knowledge, and it's just we have to be on a level to understand that next knowledge, you know, that next level. And I dig it, dude. The more and more I see stuff, the more I look at things and I go, man, it's so layered, and it's done perfectly too. People like you are extremely, you know, you don't get into the fantasy, the myths and all this. You're like, nope, there's science behind it and I'm going to find it.
Yeah.
To where me, I'll kind of get a little bit of the myth because, dude, I like myths, man. I love them. You know, I love that little spark, you know, that like, hey, man, this is kind of wild, you know, unicorns, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's just good to think like that, you know, it's just kind of cool. Unicorns are in the Bible, though, by the way. But anyway, so it's just kind of cool to look at that. But if you look at how the knowledge is, it's so layered. throughout our whole history of humanity, everything's always been layered. It's no different now than it was back then, because there's a handful of people like you that are seeing the reality of what was done. You know, hey, this is our history, this is this. And then to the other side, you've got people that are just like, you know, oh, a big fish, you know, swallowed this guy and he lived in it for a while and came up, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just great, dude. I love it.
Yeah. You know, somebody posted this the other day and it made me laugh so hard. I'm trying to remember. It was I see all this on Twitter. It's one of the people I follow, but basically they posted a picture of the Canaanite god Moloch, right? The one that devours, that asks for child sacrifice. And basically, when you actually go and you read about this, it talks about how, you know, in this ancient time in the Canaanite gods, that the god would ask like their follower to sacrifice their son, you know, their firstborn son to the god, and then, you know, it's the same story as like Abraham and Isaac, you know, where the god would trick them and said, okay, now show me that you're is. So it was like the same exact story. We're like, oh my god, how come I never saw that before? You get these really, really interesting things that come from all these different places. And if you just kind of put the horse blinders up and you only focus on one thing, you have to understand there's this whole rich mosaic, this whole rich tapestry of knowledge and stories. And when you peel back those layers, it may have nothing to do with child sacrifice at all. It may have been an allegory or something happening with nature, and it was put into this kind of perspective, and then it just got this life of its own, just like with Saturn devouring his children, time devouring his children. You see, you know, a lot of people show that symbol of, you know, like, oh, the Saturn cult where, you know, he's eating the children, and it comes from a very, very interesting story that plays over and over again in myth constantly, which is this whole you actually made me laugh when I posted this because I posted it on Father's Day, devouring your children. but basically the whole idea and concept is that time devours all things. You can't escape time, and even time couldn't escape time in those mythologies, because, you know, he heard that his son or one of his children is going to usurp him in the future and then become the god of time. So he got very scared and says, okay, well, that's not going to happen. I'm just going to go eat all my children so they don't usurp me. And then Jupiter survives and kills time. You know, so it's all about this self-fulfilling prophecy that even time can't outrun time. But then we make all this other stuff up and we put our own ideas into it. And now we have a new mythology about all these things. So what we're trying to do is try to say, well, why did this story come about? Why, you know, where did it come from? What was the original and how did it evolve? And, you know, when we're talking about the books and we're talking about these, let's say like, archetypes of the zodiac or these grand myths of the stars, they didn't just pop up overnight. It's like they could have been around at the time of Göbekli Tepe. And yes, it wasn't like the zodiac we have today, but it evolved to the zodiac we have today. And this is kind of like we're trying to like find the connections to say, well, it came from this culture to this culture, then the story changed, and then this culture to this culture, and the story changed. But we can follow this route and go, oh my God, are we killing each other over this stuff?
Yep. Kind of like ancient nursery rhymes, because people love nursery rhymes, but if you knew the reality of what they were really saying, you'd be like, holy shit, I'm singing this to my kid? What the hell?
Yeah.
Those Germans.
Grimm's fairy tales. Yeah. Shit. Well, one of my favorite albums is based on those, actually. But now, super random question, but what do you make of, the zodiac and like, the like in Chinese, like the year of the dog, the year of the rat, the year of the rabbit, blah blah blah. All of them are real animals, except all of a sudden there's a dragon in there. Do you think that they just threw in a dragon just for shits and giggles, or do you think maybe there actually was something resembling a dragon at least? Like, because
dinosaurs.
Yeah, could be. I mean, but I don't know. Across your research, have you ever sort of found anything that would give more credence to that being on the list, as opposed to a bunch of real, like where did that come from? Where does the dragon come from?
Okay, well, let's just go right to Chinese mythology or Chinese mysticism. And we get into something called the dragon lines. So this is very, very ancient knowledge where basically what a dragon line is an earth energy that travels on the planet. And what they would do is they try to find these dragon lines because they believe that certain dragon lines would be good fortune. So you would build temples or build houses or important things on these dragon lines to bring good fortune. And then there was the evil dragon lines where, it's like life taking. You don't want to live or be near these dragon lines because they will devour you. They'll kill you, basically. So this was kind of like this old ancient science of dragon lines. And what they describe a dragon line is as the life-giving dragon lines were near like rivers and mountains. And when you look at a river, it has this kind of beautiful dragon-like serpentine body, what a river looks like from above. And same with the mountains. The way the mountains form through erosion, it creates this kind of dragon-like form. See what I'm getting at here? So, and where's a dragon? Where do you find the dragon? It's in the mountain. You go to the mountain, it's protecting the gold in the mountain. Water dragon. So you have these different types of dragons that are very much related to this dragon line mysticism. And in fact, the dragon line itself, even that word, the dragon line, goes back to the emperors. They came from the dragon line, positions of power, or positions of the knowledge. So I believe that it's a mythical animal created from the knowledge of how energy flows.
Yeah, so pretty similar to like the idea of ley lines, I guess.
Yes.
And
that's a new one.
And didn't they also the emperors had to be buried on the dragon lines? Wasn't that a thing as well?
I'm not quite sure, but that sounds about right. I mean,
or like it was not just that, but like you couldn't just bury a regular person on a dragon line. Like that was a big no-no.
Well, that would definitely make sense because you don't want to really mess with the dragon line.
Yeah, don't mess with the dragon line, son.
Yeah. But again, it's like we really did have dinosaurs. We can call them dragons. We did have these great beasts. And I'm sure that somewhere in our consciousness, but you also have to remember, you think we're the first people in the world to see a dinosaur bone?
Right.
It's like suddenly we figured out archaeology like a couple hundred years ago and we're like, oh, we discovered dinosaurs. I guarantee you somebody's working in a field a couple thousand years ago and they discover these bones or fossils and they're like, a dragon. It's like, what else can they call them?
Right, yeah. And Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, let's switch gears a little bit here. Let's get into your new book, Astral Experiences, which we haven't really had a chance to talk about yet. For those that are just now hearing about this book or haven't checked it out yet, what's let's let them know. What's it all about? What you got going on in there?
All right. Well, this is the new book, Astral Experiences. And basically, these are very, very personal stories, very personal stories of my kind of awakening experiences with out of body travel, contact, and anything phenomenon related. All right. So I've had a lot of experiences. I've been here about 43 years in my life, and I've had a lot of very interesting experiences that I think that people don't share these things. You know, when you have an experience that is really out there or really personal, you kind of keep it in your own kind of space. You don't really go out like me and stand up and start talking about these things. These are like campfire stories with your best friends that you can like say, hey, you know what happened to me? Like, last night I had this experience where I left my body and there was this being in the room and it told me this. And so these are like campfire stories. But I believe that it's not just for me, it's for anybody that's going through these type of experiences, because I know it can be very isolating to kind of have these crazy out of body experiences or altered states of consciousness. And again, what Pat was talking about earlier is we come at everything from a religious standpoint. So we have these like goggles on where if something happens to us, immediately we put it through this filter system of, angels, demons, God, devil, we just wrap it up and go, this is what it is because this is what we believe in. That's what we're taught. And in my book, I kept all religious ideas out completely. I didn't talk about anything of that sort. All I did was tell the experience exactly how it went from like A to B, exactly how I felt, exactly what the situation was. And I did not kind of go into this whole what I believe it is, because that kind of unfolds naturally if you just kind of sit back and observe the situation, you know? So I think that it's kind of like the astral experiences, it covers a lot of phenomenon like alien contact, out of body experiences, other dimensions, other incarnations, past lives, current lives. It talks about the UFO phenomenon, so contact experiences, abductions. It talks about weird stuff like portals on the planet, time travel, all types of mysteries, and how we kind of relate to it and how people have related to it for thousands of years. And right now we kind of belittle people that talk about this. We pass it off as, oh, this is crazy nonsense. But there's so many people out there like myself, like you guys, that have come face to face with the experience, face to face with the phenomenon. And there's nobody in the world that's going to tell you, oh, it was just a hallucination, or oh, it was just a trick of light, or you must have misread what happened. You know exactly what happened. And we have to not be afraid to share what's real and authentic. And I think that's the whole point of this book, is that you have to be completely authentic, open, and real about what had happened. Because if we don't tell our story no, we're not going to learn. And, we were talking about science before. This is like the next level of science. It really
Exactly.
is. We've stopped ourselves from exploring the next level of human evolution, in my opinion.
Yes.
So we've completely
Well,
stopped. And
normal
this is,
people,
yeah,
normal people have stopped, but you know that the government, they've been doing this scientifically for so long. I mean, look at the remote viewing. It's just the general public, they don't want nobody knowing any of this. And they use religion as a blocker. They use everything to block this from us. And I'm not going off on a tangent with conspiracy theories. This is all facts.
yeah,
My thing is this: I think it's time, and I love the book, man, because that coming out, I'm hoping will push people to say, hey, here's my truth. We no longer tell each other truths. We're telling each other, what we're told. And that's what has to end. People need to open up and say exactly, hey, this happened to me and this is how it was. But people need to be accepting. And it blows my mind that the government does this stuff. They have classes now that you can take at college, to do remote viewing and stuff. But then they still want to sit there and tell you, hey, that's devil stuff. And I'm like, dude, you can't have it both ways. We're either doing science or we're doing religion. We can't sit here and do both of them.
yeah.
So
And
I appreciate the book, man.
thank you. Thank you very much. And that's the whole thing, is that it distorts what's happening, and it's done purposefully. These are like guards against opening certain doors. They scare you. They put a lot of fear into all this information. And again, it's like when we talk about science and technology, or even biological technology or biological shifting into something else, like we only see a very small amount of reality. Literally, we only see a very small amount of reality. And we can do so much more than we're told, and we can expand so much more, but we put the blockers on ourselves. And once we start to take those away, we go, oh, we live in a much grander reality than we're taught. And that's kind of like stepping out of the matrix. It's like you're now like Neo, and you're like, oh my God, there's another world out there. And then you realize, wait a second, this whole structure that we're in right now in the physical world is the way it is because we're being artificially controlled, and I don't want to say brainwashed, but we need to see the world in a certain way for the society to move forward in a certain way. And if people step out of that and see the world differently, the paradigm of the world has to change with that. And it cannot do that right now. So they say. So this is why I still get made fun of, because it's almost like a, I don't know how to say this. It's like defense mechanism. If I'm in a group of, let's say, normal people, and I've done this before, like I remember I was like, out for lunch in Palm Springs, and I was with a bunch of people that were later on in life. Like I think everybody at the table was between 70 and 90 years old. All right. And you know what they say? It's like, oh, young man, like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I write books about this, this, and this. And, the subject matter of like out of body experience, near death experience. And I'll never forget this, but this gentleman at the table like slammed his hand on the table when I was speaking. And he goes, that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah.
And it's like they've never said it to anybody. And it took me, this young guy, to say, oh, this is, I talk about this stuff. And they're like, oh my God, that happened to me. So even in a group of, let's say, like 100 people, I guarantee you, we're talking a group of like 100 normal people, what we consider normal. The moment we start talking about it, there is a group in that 100 people that will go, I never told anybody about this, but yes, that happened to me.
Right. Yeah. And so you're in a way your new book, Astral Experiences, has basically metaphorically invited everyone to the campfire, right?
Correct.
And I think the timing of the release of a book like this is all the more impactful coming from you, because you just put out several books back to back that, I mean, between Astral Genesis and Gates of the Anunnaki, you like quite literally have made some absolutely groundbreaking discoveries and realizations as to what the ancients were doing, why they were doing it, and how they did it. So it's not like it's just coming from the homeless guy behind McDonald's. You know, like you have very well established yourself.
I don't know why you're bringing that up. It was a couple of years ago.
Hey, you know, I was going to say Wendy's to try to cover it up, but yeah, you know, I mean, you know, one fast food dumpster's as good as the next, but you know, but I just think it's because, I mean, you've been on fire for the last several years, and your work is you know, it's unheckleable. Like it's real. Like even if someone doesn't resonate with it, they can't deny that it's real. You know what I mean? And so for you to have established that baseline and then come out with Astral Experiences and open that metaphorical campfire to everybody, I think is you've just done that in a very powerful way.
Thank you. Thank you. And, you know, it was cathartic. And it was just like writing Forbidden Knowledge all over again. Because remember, it's like we bottle this stuff up inside. Like, really, like when I go, like, I have childhood friends. I'm still good friends with these people. And it's like I'll go to them when this would happen. And if I start talking about this type of subject matter, their faces change and they're like, yeah, you know, maybe you shouldn't tell that stuff. You shouldn't talk about that stuff. Or I don't, like, flat out, I don't believe you. Like, just stop talking about this stuff. So you bottle this stuff up inside of you. And I remember when I first met Bob Mitchell, and he, you know, when we first wrote that first book, he was like, okay, now I just want you to sit down and just write everything that you could remember of like every type of experience that you've had, like go over that. And it was extremely cathartic to like write it out, because I've held this in for so long that it has to kind of come out in a certain way, or, you know, who knows what would happen. You know, it builds up, you have this big emotional release, who knows what happens. So getting this out there, it's like telling your story. And we all have a story. And this is just mine. I know it's, you know, but again, when you share it, it's like a ripple effect, complete ripple effect. Like I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to randomly where I talk about, you know, the sleep paralysis and seeing like the shadow at the end of your bed. And it was, you know, I was in another story. It was, I was in Japan and I was having dinner, and there was one of these wrestlers there. Wrestling is really big in Japan. And we're sitting at a table, and again, I was telling the story about the sleep paralysis and the shadow. And again, it's like one of the wrestlers slammed his hand on the table, just like the old guy, and goes, "That happened to me, exactly what you said." It's like, did we just become best friends? I was like, yeah. I was like, awesome, you know? So as we tell these stories, you realize you're not alone. There's so many people out there that had the exact same thing happen to them. But again, because of religion, because it's hidden and not talked about, we have no clue what's happening. We have no clue why it's happening. We don't understand these phenomenons at all. And this is why we have ghost stories on TV, because, you know, or like the X-Files on TV. We love those shows because it's like kind of moving us into seeing this glimpse of this other reality that we know is there, but it's hidden from us. and we want to know the mystery. So it takes people speaking about their experiences to actually put the pieces together. I have a piece, you have a piece, and when we all share it, we're like, wow, we're starting to really understand this reality we're in.
Yeah, and I almost think, well, first of all, someone was asking in the chat room, where can they get a signed copy of your book? And I believe the answer is yes, you can. If you order through his website, thecrystalsun.com, he will autograph your book and send it to you. Now, it does come from Canada, so there's, you know, a little bit of, it's not going to get there the next day, but it'll get there.
Yeah.
And also, you can use the promo code Shift Happens and save yourself a few bucks as well if you order from there. And I think, so are your last 4 books all still available from there?
Everything's available on the Crystal Sun, but again, I am from Canada, so the shipping sucks. But yeah, signed copy, no problem. But if you can't wait, I know, especially in the US, Amazon is very fast.
Yeah.
In
like
fact, when I
Monday.
put the book out, people get the book a week or two before I even get my first copy.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that they are signed with maple syrup and not ink. That is the Canadian way.
So the pages are stuck together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, have you noticed that when you talk to like a group of people, that everybody kind of looks the same, and they're just kind of like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But then all of a sudden, a couple of them kind of, after everybody breaks up, they come to you and they go, hey, I didn't want to say nothing, but, because I get that a lot with how I am, because I get people that I'll be talking to a lot of people. I'm pretty boisterous about stuff. I could care less. I'm getting older, screw them all. But I sit and talk to a lot of religious people and stuff, and they'll get mad and, you know, sit there and say stuff. But then those are the same people that always hit me one-on-one, and they're like, hey, you know, you were talking about that, and I kind of had this experience. And I just stand there and smile, because I'm like, why can't you just be honest and just go, hey, this is what's happening?
Yeah.
You know, that's the problem. But do you get people like that?
Of course. Of course. I've kind of like kept my mouth shut in public. Unless I'm at, let's say, like a UFO conference or something like this, then it's easier to talk. But, you know, some people have surprised me. Like, you know, some people in my family even have come to me and said, you know what, this has happened to me too. So, you know, even though it's not public, they know it's real, and they'll like confirm it and say, yeah, it's happened to me. But again, there is this kind of stigma. And I know there's a stigma because, like, look, I went public. I told my story. I have my face on, you know, conferences and things like this. If I were to try to get a normal job in the normal world, I think they would see my resume, Google me, and just turn the page. You know, so I've kind of I've isolated myself just from me speaking publicly. That's why I sell crystals online.
There you go.
Which,
I just
by the
noticed
way,
that I think a lot of
well, just real quick, not only can you get Jason's books from his website, but he's got all kinds of crystals and just cool shit that you can get from over there. Yeah, I'm not sure about the promo code Dragon Rose.
I don't think it. Here's the issue about the promo code. Yeah, I'm very sorry about it, but I had to update the WordPress, and once I updated the WordPress, it's like that feature, it was gone.
Okay, so no promo for you. You're paying full
Sorry
price.
about that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So yeah, but thanks for trying, Dragon Rose. But yeah, so no worry about, don't even worry about that. Just go ahead and yeah, she's ordering her book right now as we speak. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah, but anyway,
what I was getting ready to say, what I notice is so many people are so willing to just live an illusion because they don't want to be uncomfortable. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back, is because human beings love routine You know, we just love that safe feeling of I'm waking up, I have my coffee, I have this, and it's the routine thing. You get them out of that routine, and it's like, oh my God, wait a minute, you know. And I think that it's hard on people to understand. I think it breaks people's psyche pretty quick when they go, oh my God, reality's not what I thought it was. And then they shut down. They're like, okay, this is evil. I don't want to listen to it. That's, you know, it's not my, no, it can't happen like this. You know, and I see that a lot I live in the Midwest, so I've got a lot of, you know, religion around me. And it's just, I see it all the time. But I do find that within the last 10 years, I see more people opening up. I mean, Christians that I know are coming to me asking me questions. And I'm like, why don't you learn the history of your religion? You know, my child asked me one day, she's like, Dad, I think I want to get baptized. I said, okay, I've never told you no in life, but this is the one time I'm going to tell you no. Until you can tell me the history of that religion and why you're doing what you're doing, I disagree with you doing it. And what's funny is she came to me later and she's like, Dad, I think I'm going to wait. And I said, okay, why? She goes, because I've asked people and I keep getting different answers. And I go, exactly. You know,
And I don't exactly remember where you live, but I remember I was you may get a laugh out of this. I was at a conference in Chicago, in one of the suburbs of Chicago, and I had a booth. And back then, it was so early. The only crystal I had was shungite. Okay, so that's how long ago it was. It's got to be like 2012 or 2013, and all I had was shungite. So I had a table full of shungite in Chicago, and when people would come to the table, you know, I would tell the story. You know, shungite six. It's a. I was about to say 6 billion years old. It's not 6 billion years old. Um, I think it's 2 billion years old. See, I haven't sold shungite in a long time, but basically, it's a very old stone. It has a lot of Earth history in shungite. And so people come to the table, I talk about shungite. And the guy in the booth next to me was like, his face was just turning red, like beet red. And
mm-hmm.
and then he kind of came to the table and he's like, oh, tell me about the stone. So again, I told about the history of the stone. And he like slammed his hand on the table and he's like, you can't say that. I'm a Baptist minister and
Yeah.
the earth is only 6,000 years old and what you're saying goes against, and you can't tell people that here. And it's just, at first I was like, is this real? Like, is this actually happening? And
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just like stopped saying the year and I just was talking about the stone, you know, but like I couldn't believe how set people are in their mindset. Just as something as simple as a stone, just talking about the age of it.
So many people have had experiences and they will not let themselves realize that it happened. They will tell themselves that didn't happen. The devil's messing with me. Oh, well, I was, this, I was that, this happened, that happened. You know, and that's the thing. People have to let go of everything. You can't, what's funny is people hold on to stuff and you can't grab anything else as long as you're holding on to something. You know, it's real simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of stuff now, if you look at society, man, I think everybody, because of all the fighting, I think it's just because people are realizing that what they've been holding wasn't the answer and it wasn't what they needed to hold. And it's hard for them to let go of this and grab the new thing, the new age coming. You know, it's just, this transition's really tough on people. But I'm glad your book's talking about a lot of that. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, man. I've talked to you before and you've said this story before. I'd like you to tell it again because it's, to me, it just, the good and evil thing I have a hard time with, you know, because good and evil is a perspective. You know, is water good? Well, yeah, as long as you're drinking it, but if you're putting somebody's head under it, probably not. So it's just how we use things. And I remember a story you told about you had a black entity around you and then you all of a sudden let go and go ahead and tell the story if you would. I love it because, it's awesome.
Oh, all right. I'll try to remember exactly the one that because there's a lot of dark entity stories in this book.
Well, this was the one where you realized it was you.
Oh, okay. Yes. So there's a lot of times where, it's kind of like a fight or flight response. So it's like you wake up in the middle of the night and there's, let's say, this shadow or entity, and it's crawling on you, or it feels like it's suffocating you, or it could just be in the room. And the first thing that comes to your mind is fight or flight. So you're either going to like try to wake up, try to get away from it, or like try to physically get it off you and fight it. And this would happen a lot in my experiences where I'm either fighting it or trying to get away from it. And one night, it was a completely different thing. It was like I felt no like fear from it, and it came onto the body. And instead of fighting it, what I did was I actually put like my arms around it and I pulled it into my body. Like it felt very natural. And when I did that, it was like a piece of me returning home. And it like the energy transformed, and it was so powerful that like, talk about like a Kundalini rising or something like that. It was like a magical, ecstatic feeling that I just did something that was so powerful that, and my realization is that like, this is the whole concept of like soul retrieval. Whereas like we have this, sometimes when we go through a trauma, a piece of us gets broken off or an aspect of us is shattered. And it's this wounded part of us that over time we don't recognize. So it's trying to come back and rejoin us, but we're going, oh my God, this is something ugly. I can't go near this thing. It doesn't feel good. Well, yeah, because it's a broken part of you. And then when you go through this kind of shamanic path of like healing whatever this entity is, you realize that, wait a second, this is part of me, and this is why it keeps coming back and trying to get in touch with me. And so it's our interpretation. It's really our interpretation. So, in the book, I talk about many of these experiences, and sometimes the beings that are very beautiful looking, very bright light, sometimes they manipulate and trick you. And sometimes these darker beings are just aspects of your soul or aspects of your consciousness. So it's like we're kind of taught, I don't want to say the opposite, but from my perspective, you can't give energy to either one. You have to stay neutral, completely neutral to the experience, and then figure out how you could handle that situation. All right, so it's not the same every single time. And again, we're not taught these things. But in shamanic culture, they actually do teach you these things. But even there, I think a lot of the knowledge has been lost.
See, that's the one thing you know me, man. The book thing, I've never followed any one path. Okay. That's just, I think if you do that, you lose a lot,
Yeah.
I think everything, like you're saying in your book, it's all experience, man. Everything is just the wisdom. And there's so many books out there with knowledge, and like Gigi knows how I say this, man. Knowledge is reading the book, wisdom is writing the book. I wish more people would write their book instead of just reading, accepting it, and going, okay, this is it. I'm glad you put your stuff out there in this book like that, man. I think it's going to help people. It's just, that's what we need, more of this kind of communication than we do yelling at each other, talking at each other. Instead of, I miss the old debate. I used to love debating people. I would sit and just, because if I'm debating with you, the greatest thing is there's something in me that's blocked. And as soon as I'm talking to you, you're going to open that up, because it's going to make me think a different way. I think so many people just do not structure their brain to learn anymore. It's just, I accept this and that's it. There's no, well, what about this way? What about that way? Dude, I appreciate you putting this book out, and I really, really, really think everything you're doing out there right now is really great, man.
Thank you.
Because it's really putting that thought out there with people, and I'm hoping that people are not going to be, closed up anymore, man. I think that's going to hopefully open some people up. Because, dude, I'll tell you what, man, we need books that we can hand people and go, hey, man, check this book out, and just walk away. Because most of the time people look at books and they're like, oh, what's this about, blah, blah, blah. It's nice to have something where somebody's going to go, oh, these are interesting stories. Because then it gets their mind going, and then they're going to sit here going, wait a minute, I had this happen to me. That opens up the discussion, man. I love it, dude. I love it. I appreciate you for doing this.
Thank you. And, because of the internet, we have, we could even call this an echo chamber, because we're on the kind of the same mindset right here. But there's these extreme echo chambers that are mainstream, where it's like there's the debate from two different sides, but it's not two different sides. It's like you have the same people on the same side debating with each other. So you never get to see outside of that. And I think a lot of people, and this is why, when people say fake news, they get it, are starting to get it, because they understand they're only getting one story. And, as I grow older and I watch the politicians speak, it's the most incredible thing when you actually sit and listen to a politician speak,
right?
Because they can lie by telling you the truth.
Yeah.
They're a freaking master. They know what words to leave out in a sentence so that what they're saying is true, but it's also a manipulation. It's incredible. So, like I said, it's very like for most people, when they just hear these things, they're like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, well, of course that makes sense. But they've just set your mind in a way that they want your mind to be set. Politicians are a master class in psychology and manipulation. It's amazing. So, yeah, we live in a very manipulative world.
Just an FYI, I was on the city board for about 12 years, man, and I fought with Chicago. I went through 2 or 3 mayors. I mean, I got them so mad they quit because I was the one person the whole town loved. They'd come to me and they're like, hey, dude, this is happening. I'm like, I'll take care of it, because I didn't give a shit. I'm here for the people. You can tell a good politician. This is how I tell anybody. I don't choose, but I'll be around people for this. If you are service to yourself, I can't be around you. If you're service to others, I'll be around you, because you're the person. If you're serving others, then to me, your open-mindedness is always willing to be open-minded. When you're service to self, you're closed off. I can't deal with that. And that's how you look at the politicians. You can tell them, right away, you can tell a politician, if they're serving themselves and they're coming out ahead, and just by some chance, they're like, oh, hey, this is helping you too. Hey, yeah, I meant to do that. And you're like, dude, get the fuck out of here, man. So, that's how I look at people. You're either service to self or service to others. And that's just how it was. Like I said, 12 years I was on the board, dude. I served everybody. I didn't care about me. I didn't do it for the money. My board, I think I got paid like $25 a month or something. But I was the one that I was in Chicago. Oh, man. They didn't like me. I'll tell you what, just to prove your point, I actually talked to a DA, and he sat down and told me, he said, look, man, he says, this is the way the system is. You're not going to change it. The system will always take care of itself. You're going up against the wind. You're not going to win. How can I help you? And I looked at him, I said, okay, I get it. And, 12 years, I said, I'm done, okay? The only way you're going to beat the system is in the system. But if there's only one against a million, you're not going to do it. That's why your book hopefully is going to open people up, man. You got to get people open up and talking instead of fighting.
Yeah, invite them to the campfire. And I mean, that's exactly those campfire experiences. I'm going to keep using that analogy. Is
Yes.
My best friends in this world is not only did we all grow up skateboarding together and we all pursued professional skateboarding and had the same sponsors, had that same journey as that is, but so there's that core group, but there's a core group within that where we have all had this experiences. In fact, we have a code word for that topic, which is glowing green, which in a long story short, that's where the name Gigi comes from. Gigi is short for glowing green, and the rabbit was just a mascot for our band that was called that at the time before it changed to Don't Mind Us. So that's actually where the name Gigi comes from. It's not good game. It's,
Clip it. This is the lore.
yeah, people ask that all the time. Where did that come from? It's a little bit longer of a story than that, but short answer, it stands for glowing green, and that stands for these campfire experiences that we have all shared and related to each other, and through that have made these lifelong bonds that are so much more powerful than like even family to a certain extent. You know, like we're like our own little family that understands each other, and we're able to express to each other these experiences, and we know that we're being 100% with each other, you know. So again, I love how you're sort of opening the campfire in that sense. Now I got a good question for you, but real quick, I do want to say Dragon Rose says in the chat room, she says her uncle was a Roman Catholic priest and had 14 past life experiences that he wrote about in his books, and she will be sharing that on her YouTube channel very soon. So Dragon Rose, if you would like, go ahead, and if you have a link to your YouTube channel, go ahead and put that in the chat, and then I'll say it out loud for the people that are not looking at the live chat replay. But so, you know, I was listening to well, I'm not sure if it was MAPS or if it was a different organization, but they were sort of trying to study and figure out what's going on with this very reoccurring thing that happens with, in this case, it's with DMT, where, and this has happened to me a couple of times, where, you know, you do enough to blast off and you are just rejected, and you get turned right back around with no effect, as if nothing ever happened, which is very different from building up a tolerance, if you know what I mean. Like, there's no tolerance here. This is literally, you did it, you got to the door, just no. And I have a very specific couple of stories of how that took place. I think the first one of which is, just very long story short, blasting off on my way there, and people call them the machine elves or whatever. They look more like little Keebler elves to me. But they were like trying to make me laugh before I got through the barrier, and I was just resisting. But then finally, all of a sudden, I just go, ha! Like, laughed out loud, and I was like, ah, no, you're not ready. Okay, back around, go back. We'll try again next time. And but apparently, I didn't know that until relatively recently, that I thought that was just a me thing. But apparently, so many people have had this experience that they're like studying it with the MAPS organization. I believe it's MAPS. It might be another one. Is actually studying this and trying to figure out why it is. I think it's pretty simple why it is. You've already gotten what you need to know at that time, and you know, it's just like anything. You can abuse anything, right? You can drink too much water, you can eat too much salt, you can have too much truth, too much realization, I guess, and perhaps it becomes a point to where it's redundant. There's no point of you going there right now, if that makes any sense. So my question is, with all of your various types of experiences in your book, you know, obviously, I don't know, maybe there's a DMT one or two, but, you know, I'm sure there's lots of other ones, DMT or not. is there, or psychedelic or not, have you ever had, you know, tried to, whether it's astral travel or astral project or whatever, and actually been denied in any sense before?
The short answer is no, I haven't. But
Wow.
um, it's I don't even know. Anyways, um, there's this one time where I did smoke DMT. It's one of these stories, right? It's not in the book, and it didn't happen while I did it. All right, so it happened when I went to sleep at night. Okay, so it's almost like the experience happened when I went to sleep, and when I went to sleep, it's almost like I went to this like house party, and when I got to this house party, everybody was just looking at me and they're like, "You're not supposed to be here. Why are you here? You're not invited." And I was like, and immediately in my mind, it's like, "Oh shit! Like this is the DMT world." Like in my dream, I was just like, "Oh shit! Like I'm sorry, you know, I'm here now. Could we just like be cool?" Like, and it was like, and they're like, "Oh, okay, come on in," you know. So at first it was like, "What the hell are you? Well, why are you here? You're not supposed to be here."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, but I am. So maybe let's just go forward," you know.
Yeah, what, that's such a unique experience that is. And but it's interesting it happened in your dream afterward.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And
Have you noticed that with experiences, have you noticed the more, how do I say this? Um, Natural experiences are more intense than the drug induced ones?
100%. 100%.
Because I know that all my experiences that were mind expanding, kundalini, whatever you want to call it, those were always natural and they were always done at the time I needed it. I don't think that's why the magic thing doesn't work with me. People who want to be doing ceremonial magic, I get it.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can force a lot of that because you're only going to get it when it's time for you to have it. Because every time I've ever had it, it's always been natural. The only time I did something, I was tripping on acid. The only time I had anything wild happen was out of body, and I went above my body on acid, and I was like sitting there like, hey, this is cool. And then I thought, wait a minute, that's me. And then boom, got back into my body. But other than that, which do you find better? You said it was the natural, so can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of, look, there was a time in my life where I thought that plant medicines would get me back to where I've been,
Same.
So I've had the experiences, I know what they're like, and I'm like, okay, well, can mushrooms get me there? So I do the mushrooms, and no, it didn't. Could ayahuasca get me there? Did the ayahuasca? No. All of them were great. Like, I'm not going to put them down. Like, they have their place, and I had my experiences, but it was not anywhere close to what I was used to. So I was kind of trying to chase to redo the experiences I've had using these things, and I would never get there. That was my personal opinion. But I forgot what I was going to say about this. But
well,
oh yeah,
so
here's
go ahead.
here's what I wanted to say, because this is a new thing that started to happen to me. Over the past couple of years, I've had experiences in the dream world where it's like, well, I'll just put it like this. Like, let's say in the dream world, someone will come up to me and say, smoke this, in the dream world. And then I would take the puff in the dream world, and suddenly it's like, boom, have the full crazy experience, and like wake up and go, damn, that was the craziest trip I've ever had. But I took nothing in the real world.
Right.
All right.
So it's like, I'm getting like dream dosed.
Dude, same thing has happened to me several times. And what's even more interesting is so I feel like at least I'm right there with you in terms of plant medicine, like it's almost like an appetizer. Like when you first get into those, it's like it shows you what is able to be tapped into, but it's a very brief stay. It's just, you're like a tourist, you know what I mean? But then where it really kicks in for me is the float tank. And I've harped on about this for years on my show, but boy, the sensory deprivation float tanks, that is where I really got to go back to those places, but not as a tourist. And in fact, there were 2 different times where, just like you said, in the float tank, got there, and then while I was there, they offered me a hit of this, and then boom. But meanwhile, I didn't act, I'm just floating in a tank. That's so wild you said that. The same thing has happened to me. And that just boy, there's nothing quite like waking up from that and trying to put together what that was.
But it's incredible because it's like we've had those experiences of trying different things, right, to try to reach a certain level of awareness, and it feels like it's almost cheating, where it's like you're just in the dream and they're like, here you go, in the dream, and suddenly you're in some other dimension having these crazy experiences, and you wake up and it's like, man, I felt like I just cheated.
Yeah, and one of those 2 times was actually, it was some form of fungi that so I'm in a flotation tank, I'm projecting somewhere, wherever I'm at, there I'm getting this metaphorical mushroom basically, and I take it. And this was back when I would float for like 4 or 5 hours straight per session. And like in that dream world, an hour would go by with nothing. And then all of a sudden it kicks in. It's like, oh, that's right. I did take some like an hour ago. But again, this is all within the dream. And I don't know if dream is the right word, but this other state that I was in.
Yeah. We have to like distinguish. It's like there's the dream world, and then there's this kind of like other thing. And it's, I don't even want to say it's like you just go into this other dimension, which is like a dream, but you're completely there, aware and conscious. It's not even a lucid dream. It's something else.
Yeah. I mean, it's in some instances for me, it's even more real than this right here, than us talking, like, which is very hard to come to terms with or understand. And then there's been times where, you're at that place and then you wake up from it, or so you think, only to wake up from that and then be here, which, boy, what a trip. No pun intended.
And I just want to say something else, is that when you're professionals like us, it moves away from the substance to you. And it's like, and I've heard, like, let's say like Ram Dass used to talk about this, where it's like, let's say, for example, like I smoke a joint, right? Instead of going into that kind of like high mode, it almost kind of bypasses into this kind of shamanic experience. And then it's like, let's say you do something else or a meditation, you get to the same place, so it's almost like, I remember when you're younger and things, and you go into that experience, it's like you have certain things happen. The same thing happens every time. Now it's almost like this kind of like gateway or tool to activate something in you that's at a certain place already.
Absolutely.
It's just saying, oh, okay, Jade wants to chill and relax. Because I remember, like, with, for example, ayahuasca, one of the main things with ayahuasca is that everything becomes lighter. So it's like you can be in the middle of the night with pitch dark and it's like everything just kind of glows. Like there's this kind of like white luminescence in the outer visual wall, you know? And it's like the other night I was like sitting by the fire and I'm just chilling and suddenly that thing opened up and I'm like, oh my God, this like that exact same world that when I did ayahuasca, just by me being with that fire, suddenly that visual effect started to happen to me. You know, I'm like, okay, this is very interesting. Where it literally felt like there was a spotlight in my environment, and then when I let go of it, suddenly it's dark again. And then I go, okay, you got to calm down again, and suddenly it's like the whole area becomes light. It's the craziest thing. So it's us. Okay, we're experiencing ourselves. The plants are showing us these little parts of ourselves. And it's not the plant, it's you. So once it shows you these things, it could be 10, 15 years after I did ayahuasca that I could be sitting by the fire and suddenly it's like, oh, this is just a natural thing that's happening.
Absolutely. Very eloquently said. Reminds me of that Bill Hicks bit I posted the other day, you know. But you know, we are the universe experiencing itself subjectively, and sometimes you're shown that in a very more tangible way than normal. Yeah, it's, you know, and sometimes I really wonder if, because, you know, everybody, well, I don't know about everybody, a lot of people are distracted with whatever, but, you know, people that pursue these sorts of experiences and try to understand them and try to make what they can of it, we're constantly trying to understand it more, trying to understand it better, trying to feel it more, just trying to comprehend it more. And I almost wonder if, like, there's a threshold that, like, in a sense, you're not supposed to be able to understand it all, but if somehow you actually do, and all of a sudden you just understand everything, that's when you die. Like that's when you get hit by a bus, or that's when you have a heart attack, or, you know, surely not in every, you know, accidents happen, obviously, but it's interesting just looking back at how close some of these people in the past have gotten, and right as they're getting about as close as anybody's gotten, then they just die randomly, you know, or just sort of out of nowhere. And it's almost like like if you were training a rat to learn its way through a maze, but somebody else came in there and like showed them how, and cheated and showed them how to do it, well, that defeats the whole point of the experiment. You're trying to see how fast they can learn. So once that's it, you take the rat out, done. You know, horrible analogy, but I've always wondered if there is something to, like, because not one living person has ever just figured everything out. It almost seems like, well, not to my knowledge.
Well, if I go sooner than later, you'll just have to tell people Jay figured it out.
He got it. He nailed it. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, perfect. Well, dude, thanks again for coming on yet again. We appreciate it. And real quick, let's let everybody know where they can catch your latest book, Astral Experiences, as long as all of your others and everything that is Jason Quitt.
Yes, my main website is thecrystalsun.com, and you can find everything on there from crystals to all my books. And if you want very quick shipping for the books, all you got to do is go to Amazon. My latest book that we spoke about tonight is Astral Experiences, but we also spoke about, and they're not here. And we also spoke about Astral Genesis, Gates of the Anunnaki, and Egyptian Postures of Power. So there's 4 books up that you can find on my website, and that's me.
Fantastic. And do you have any What's your conference circuit schedule looking like? You got any talks coming up?
Yes, yes. Actually, next weekend. Next weekend, I will be in the MUFON conference in Kentucky. So that's pretty cool that I get to be at the annual MUFON conference.
Hell yeah.
And I'm going to be talking about what we talked here, which is the astral experiences. And my topic is, do we have it all wrong? Which is definitely going to stir up a lot of people at MUFON.
Where's that at?
Kentucky. It's at the border of like Cincinnati, Kentucky, I believe. Sorry, not Cincinnati, Ohio, Kentucky. Right? My geography. But anyways, if you just go to mufonconference.com, I believe you can get all that information. But basically, my topic is about the interdimensional theory and how I personally believe a lot of the contact experiences, UFO experiences, has to do with this other dimension that is right here with us right now, just out of phase with us. So that's my presentation. And in fact, the last part of my book, where's the last part of my book? So the last part of my book, which is called the Interdimensionals, the whole part back of the book, that's the basis. Actually, the whole book itself is the presentation, but mostly the back of this book where we're talking about the interdimensional connection to the experience.
Perfect. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again, Jason, for coming on, and Elfman for doing a little co-hosting tonight. And with that, we're going to go ahead and boogie on out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Shift Happens Here. This show is hosted and produced by yours truly, GG. You can follow the Shift Happens account on Twitter at Shift Happens Pod. That's where you're going to hear anything we're doing first. But also shifthappensradio.com. All of the episodes are right there on the homepage. You can download them for free. There you go. Or if nothing else, you've always got Spotify and YouTube. Associate producer is Brad Harris. You can follow him on Twitter at ADS Brad Harris. And co-host tonight was Elfman. You can follow him on Twitter at Pat Breeze, rather. And as always, all blames and faults go to Fran. That's right. Hashtag Fran's fault. All right, folks, have a great rest of your night, and don't forget to wave bye-bye.